far away out of the hundreds, perhaps even thousands of questions I've received here on the channel as the transplant helper, there is one question that stands far above them all, and that is the question that basically says this: Jim, what will we do when we get the call? The call. We all know what we're talking about when we talk about the call. We're talking about that call that we've been waiting for, some of us for so very long. That call that gives us hope, that gives us opportunity, that potentially gives us life and gives us all the things that we've only been able to dream of for some period of time. Now, that call comes with a lot of emotions wrapped up in it. Sometimes there's fear, there's anxiety, there's excitement, there's thrill, there's grief. All types of things come up that we're going to talk about even later in this video that really make getting that call kind of a nervous time, to say the least. At least maybe you'll be a little bit anxious about that. But with that being said, I do want to talk about several aspects today of getting the call that kind of give you a broader picture of what it would be like when that phone rang or when that call comes in. So let's kick it off with number one. Getting the call involves a situation. Okay, everyone's situation is going to be slightly different. Now, that can come up for several reasons. Obviously, one of them would be that because we're all receiving different organs. Now, I received a heart transplant back in 2013, so I'm almost 11 years out now, but many of you receive heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas, whatever, different and various things, and the situations there are different between all of those. The systems under which you are placed are different between all of those. The criteria under which you're living are different between all of those as far as selecting those organs and allotting those organs out to different and various people, altogether different. But there are two things that are basically typical among most of us, and that is either you will wait for transplant outpatient, out of hospital, at home perhaps, or in some other sort of care facility, or you're going to wait inpatient in the hospital, and that's where you're just going to have to wait out the duration, as we called it. That was called, in my day, that was called being condemned to the hospital for the end or until transplant. And both of those situations are very different. Obviously, when you're at home, you can have your normal things. You can have normalcy, if you will. You can have routine. You can have pattern. You can have familiar faces and familiar places to be surrounded by, and that can be quite a bit easier, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily extremely healthy. That doesn't mean that, he's waiting at home, so he's got it made. He's eating probably everything he's always enjoyed. He's getting out, he's shopping, he's going to work. Maybe not. Most likely not in that case. If you're awaiting transplant, you're going to be pretty sick no matter where you are. But if you are inpatient, things are quite a bit different. If you're inpatient, it's because you need some very critical, specialized care. And most likely, if you're inpatient, you're going to be kind of bedridden to some point at least. Maybe not completely, but you're going to have tubes and pumps and different things on you. Perhaps some of you, especially if a heart patient, for example, maybe on an LVAD, maybe on a BiVAD, may have Swan-Ganz placed in their neck, which they kind of restrict your movement in that, may have actual heart pumps or impeller pumps placed in, all sorts of things that make your situation very different. And where you are, whether it be outpatient or inpatient, that dictates kind of how this call goes. So particularly when you're inpatient, you're typically a higher priority, so the call may come more quickly. But that's the situation you have to discuss. Number two, let's discuss some of those sentiments. Talk about this from the sentiment part of that, sentimental part of that, the emotion. Basically, the emotions can be everywhere. When that call comes in, whether you get a physical call on the phone, like if you're at home, or if you're like I was in hospital, so it was just a matter of a nurse walking in the room real quick. She said, "You're MPO to further notice. We may have a match." She walked out. That was the last word that was said for like 12 hours. That's all that I knew. But getting that call in the hospital brings a number of emotions that come about at home as well. There again, there's fear, there's anxiety, there's stress, there's an feeling of being overwhelmed. There's a feeling that comes along of grief. Particularly if you're receiving a heart or lung, already for a fact that 100% of those donors are going to be deceased. And so your triumph that may be happening that day, on the other side of that, there's someone's tragedy. And so that can bring a lot of grief in that. But there's also a sense in which there's some excitement, there's some thrill, there's some happiness, there's some joy, there's some hope that lies before you. There's opportunity out there in front of you, and those sentiments can be very different. As a matter of fact, I sat down one day to make a program. This has been about 3 or 4 years ago, but to make a program discussing the emotions or the sentiments of transplant. I'll try to link it up here. It turned out to be pretty good, but I sat down to do that, and I couldn't stop writing down the number of emotions. I asked some of the Facebook groups to join in. I ended up narrowing the field down. I had to narrow it down to 25 different emotions that we experience, sometimes all at once it feels, based on getting that call. So be aware of the situation, be aware of the sentiments. And then number 3, also be aware of the standards. Okay, now each and every transplant center may have different standards by which they call. Now the majority of them, I'll use UAB Hospital for an example, the majority of them, they basically got a pool of patients that are nearly pre-selected, whether inpatient or out, but are kind of already pre-selected and deemed as being the worst of the worst health-wise. And so they're near the top of the list of those who might receive a call if an organ comes available. And a lot of times what they'll do in that situation is they'll either have some patients on the campus there in hospital that they'll reach to, or they may call some people to drive in from home. For me, if I had been at home when I got a call, it would have meant driving an hour and 15 minutes and parking and getting in the hospital and waiting and all. They'll oftentimes will bring in 2, 3, maybe 4 or more candidates to the hospital to wait while they do some of that matching. Now, what's tricky about that is that oftentimes they're not just candidates at your hospital where your transplant center is. There are candidates waiting in other areas of the region. For example, I live in a region right here, which UAB Hospital is the only hospital in Alabama that does all types of organ transplants, for example, up into the heart. But if you go over into Georgia, which is still in our region, you've got at least Piedmont Hospital and you got Emory Hospital, those two. So that's 3 hospitals under the same region. You go up into Tennessee, you've got Vanderbilt University. You go over into Mississippi, you've got the University of Mississippi. So already you've gained up to, 4, 5, 6 transplant centers inside of the same region that are going to be potentially calling in as well. Now, the way the thing works is if there's a donor organ that comes up, say it comes up in your state, maybe even in your hospital. Say, for example, if someone was passing over at UAB Hospital, they wanted to donate those organs, them and or the family wanted to donate those organs, then they would first look at UAB in-house and see who could gain those organs. That's what they did. That was kind of the standard protocol. They would look in hospital. Now, if there wasn't a match there, then they would call people that were also associated with UAB hospitals. That's where maybe I was laying in the bed in the hospital waiting, but I wasn't quite the best match, or they weren't sure that I was. So they called someone on the phone and brought them in. So now they're downstairs being admitted. They may be being brought up to the floor beside me, and there'll be multiple candidates. And then at the same time, they may be over at Emory Hospital in Georgia, or up at Vanderbilt in Tennessee, or University of Mississippi over in Jackson, Mississippi. They may be calling in patients too if this is a regional type heart. But if it's at your center where the donation is being made, they're going to try really hard to keep it at that center. Vice versa. Every other center would do the same. But if there weren't a match at home, they're going to start reaching out to other centers. So I would imagine at any given time, say a heart comes available, there could be 5, 10, 15 people involved in that you'll never know about that may have received that same call. Okay, so just be aware of that. As far as the standards go, they'll often call in several for that. Now, also be aware that most standards basically require that you won't know very much. I mentioned the first call that I got back would have been 11 years ago, a little bit more than 11 years ago. The first call that I got, which turned out to be kind of a dry run, a false alarm as we call it. They walked in, literally said, "Jim, you're MPO until further notice. We may have you a heart." Walked out of the room, 12 hours go by, I hear nothing. Nurses were in and out. They were, in and out. I would ask questions. They'd say, "I don't know. So I guess it's going well." They really had no information, or at least was willing to give no information. So kind of expect that once you get that call, there may be a long delay of just dead space. All the lines are closed where you hear crickets and you just don't get a lot of information. Don't be shocked by that. Don't be disappointed by that. That'll pretty much be a part of it, and potentially could be, just the way that it works. And those waits can be long. I've seen a number of people who will get the call and they'll tell them, be to the hospital in an hour. Of course, they're racing down there. They're down at the hospital in 25 minutes, not an hour. And then they say, "Okay, we're going to get some work done, some paperwork done. We're going to get you admitted, and we'll probably be doing surgery tomorrow at lunch," for example. And then that person is shocked because they're like, "Wait a minute, you rushed me down here, surgery's tomorrow at lunch?" Well, yeah, because the organs themselves have not been retrieved yet. They've not been, gone out and brought in yet. Okay. So morning, that's what we're looking forward to. And then in the morning comes, guess what? well, things have been delayed. We're not quite ready. So it's going to be this afternoon, around 7 o'clock, and times keep getting pushed back. People get shocked by that. And they say, how can that be, Jim? I thought that, for example, a heart could be maintained outside of the body for approximately 4 hours safely. Maybe 5 would be a stretch, but maybe about 3-4 hours safely. How can they make me wait 12 or even 24 hours for that? Well, the truth is, again, on that other end, you've got a person who is in a dire strait, as we call it here in the South. They're passing from this life. Their families have to make decisions. And those decisions are made to donate the organs already. Yes, that's how they know this, but maybe that decision to let them go is not. Maybe they're waiting on family members on the other end to come in. And you just imagine the situations where that happens. So there's a long period of time that comes by that. In addition to that, if that person is willing to donate several organs, they're not just waiting on your heart to be matched. They're waiting on the heart to be matched, the lung to be matched, the kidneys to be matched, the liver to be matched, and so forth. It could be a lot of matches involved. And although you may match very well within inside of the first 3 or 4 hours, they may be taking a lot longer to find someone to take the liver. So it just kind of takes time. So don't be overwhelmed. Don't be disappointed if things don't move very quickly, because that's highly likely. And that's just a part of the standard. So we talked about the situations, everybody being different. We talk about the sentiments. The emotions are going to be high, and they're everywhere all over the page. We talk about the standards, but let's talk about something else. This one is one that I often hear about. Jim, what about number 4, the supplies? What about the supplies? What should I take to the hospital? And I've seen so many lists over on social media. They're all great. If you go into one of these Facebook groups, I can think about the heart transplant support group being one of them, just one of them. They even have a search bar at the top. If you search something to do with what to take to the hospital, what to take when I get the call, whatever, there'll be some posts that'll come up. People have wonderful lists, and they're great lists. Don't forget your phone charger. Don't forget your hair and makeup and hygiene. Don't forget your pillow from home. That'll be more comfortable. Don't forget extra blankets, soft socks, nice pajamas. There's a wonderful list out there, and they're all telling the truth. But keep in mind that when you get that call and you go in for transplant, there are going to be days, hear me correctly, even if you're doing well, there are going to be days with a lot of S's or whatever at the end of that, where you're not going to need that stuff. Okay, all the hair and makeup and whatever that you would like, all the magazines, all the tablets and computers and all the entertainment that you would like, all those fuzzy pajamas and comfortable pillows. They're not going to do you any good for days after transplant, okay? Now, they just won't. You're going to be in a CICU situation or a HTICU, depending on the organ, an ICU type situation. You're going to be there for a while, probably for several days. I say that again. And you just will not be able to use that stuff. You just won't. Now, there'll be some of it, a small pack, a carry-on bag, we might call it. There'll be some of it that a family member may be able to bring back, maybe some chapstick for your lips and maybe your favorite cup from home to drink some water, whatever. There'll be some things you can use, but don't bring the whole house and the kitchen sink in the beginning, because you're not going to be able to use it, and your family's just going to have to drag it all over the hospital. Most of the time, families are left out in waiting areas that are crowded, outside of surgical waiting areas, particularly, they're crowded. They just don't have the space or the I guess you'd say the strength to drag those things around. Those are the things you pack, and you pack well. If you live fairly close to your home, I would say pack all those things up and have them by the door, and then just bring that one bag. And then another family member, hopefully at a point when you need those things, can bring them in. That's the best way to handle that. If you live farther away, that'll be different. Maybe you pack them and leave them in the car. Maybe you get a hotel room now nearby that someone's staying in. I just wouldn't bring it up to the hospital, okay? So if you want a full list of packing things, you can find that. There's tons of things. Great suggestions. I've got a list of things that I would suggest that you purchase to go ahead and give to someone that's waiting for transplant. Things that make life comfortable. But don't take that initially right there. So we have the situation, we have the sentiments, we have in that turn the standard and the supplies. But let's talk about one more. This one is the important one. Please listen to me carefully. Consider the social factor. Friends, when you get the call for transplant, that will be a life-changing moment period. It can be thrilling. It can be exciting. You want to spread the news. You want to get the prayers going up. But please, 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 please be careful of what and how you post about that initial call on social media. I see so many people who they get the call, and within 30 seconds, I guess, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on Snapchat, they're everywhere. They're texting friends and family. I don't blame any of them. I've been there, done that, okay? I'm speaking from experience. But they post this all over the world that they got the call, they're headed to the hospital. And that may be all that they say. I got the call, headed to the hospital. Friends, when I did that, I got my dry run call, as I called it earlier. I posted pretty quickly, and it turned out for me to be a mistake because all I posted was I got the call. Man, I started seeing stuff all over Facebook, anywhere from Jim got the call, which was exactly what I had said to. Jim got the call. He's doing great. The doctor called. Surgery's over. Jim should be coming home tomorrow. I heard that. Man, I'm going to tell you, I heard somebody that said Jim didn't do good. He's on life support. He's not doing well. Pray for him. None of that had happened as of yet. None of that. I hadn't even gotten to surgery yet. But sometimes because social media works that way, it'll become viral really quickly. The thing is that a lot of those calls don't turn out to be the one. Maybe it goes to someone else. Like my first one, my dry run, it went to a guy next door. When I literally heard them rolling him down the hall for surgery, I walked out and I shook his hand. I told him, congratulations, I'd be praying for him. But you know what I had to do? I had to go back and undo all the mess that had been done. I had to go back, as hard as it was for me to even think about it. I had to go back and let everybody know, look, I did get a call, but it wasn't the right one, and scratch that, abort the mission. And then I had to go and backtrack by all the people who had not just reposted that or shared that, but had come up with their own post with all these glory details in it. And I had to go back and say, hey, just reaching out to you, if you don't mind, pull that post. I'm not going anywhere today. Nothing's changing today. Keep praying for me, but not today. I suggest, this is my suggestion, one, I would delay any social media post, if you can, for just a little bit. Or if I'm going to post, I'll be very, very cautious. I would post very strategically by saying, I got the call. Please pray for me that this is the right one. I will keep you updated when and if anything changes. I will let you know when and if I go to surgery. I will let you know when and if we have a success. See, put in some detail. That way if people don't have the facts, a lot of people's human nature just to share the non-facts, the fake news as we call it today. So I'm just saying on social media, be real cautious. Be careful, be concise. My second time I got the call, I didn't tell a soul but my wife and my parents. So I didn't tell nobody. Not until I knew I was going to surgery. Not until they said the heart is on the way. It looks great. It's yours. Then I told some people. Just my personal choice. But I would say use some discretion there. Just be cautious. So knowing your situation, knowing the sentiments, knowing the standards, knowing the supplies, and knowing the social reactions you should have, I think that'll help you a lot when you get that call. Now, with that being said, I want you to know I, Jim Merle, the transplant helper, I'm willing to pray for you that you get that call. So if you're someone who's awaiting transplant right now, please go in the comment box below. Let us know what organ you're waiting for, maybe where you are, whatever detail you want to share, and we'll be praying for you diligently and fervently that day will come and that will be a successful transplant and you will live the best life possible, and especially that all of us too can stay stronger, my friends.